Hey everyone, welcome back to the Empowering Minds Mental Health Podcast. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Charles Whitaker. Charles is an executive coach who helps people get unstuck, find clarity, and make real changes in their lives, whether it's in their career, personal growth, or just managing the day to day stress life throws at us. So I'm excited for you to hear the insights and hopefully walk away with some tips that you can move forward to. So we're going to jump right into our podcast today. So, Charles, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to get into the coaching work that you do?
Yeah, sure. Hello to all your listeners, Jennifer. And I'll tell you a little about my background. I'm an applied scientist, so I do have this a scientist mindset about how I perceive the world. And for many years, I worked in paper manufacturing as a senior leader in a business in Scotland, in the UK, and that's been very influential about how I approach my work. On the one hand, when I arrived in the business in the mornings, the first thing I would do was to take my jacket off and go and walk around the business and talk to the operators running the machinery. It was important so that I was aware of what was going on day to day.
Mhm.
It was visibility was important. It gave me a chance to listen to the kind of problems they were facing. And when I was talking to my team to sort of get my team to think about the problems they were facing. But one of the things that was very lasting for me was the fact that many of the operators there didn't really have much ambition, but they were clever people. They'd left school at, excuse me, the oldest at 14, but usually at the age of 15, and had a solid Scottish education, but their abilities weren't being used to the full. They were very capable of what they were doing, but there was a wealth of talent which was never tapped. And I see this so often in life, and it's very frustrating when the world needs talented people and they're being pushed down or not
Mhm.
at the bottom. So that's kind of one thing. That's one thing that sort of guides my way of thinking. Now, the business I worked for in those days closed in 2008.
Mhm.
Is my English accent okay? Am I speaking too quick?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's good. Great.
The business folded in 2008. By great good fortune, I had trained in clinical hypnotherapy starting in 2004. And I did a very in-depth program which took 3 separate years, the 3 stages. And so also in 2006, the business decided that all the senior leaders should learn how to do coaching. So they brought in a training coach who was very, very good. And he taught us how to do coaching. And round about that time, I also did a course a distance course in performance coaching. So that was my basic background. And so when the business folded in 2008, I then had at least a springboard to start from. Not that I wanted the business to close. The business it was a very sad day when that business closed. It was a livelihood for many people. Even though the work was very tough, and we'll maybe talk about that again in a minute, um, it, it, um, there was a certain enjoyment in it. We did a lot of really good things as a business. Anyway, so that's my background. And since that time, over the years since then, I've added in a whole range of special skills to be able to deal with more and more things which come up with people. I'm confident and comfortable dealing with deep trauma nowadays. In those days, I wasn't quite so comfortable, but I now I've had lots of experience now in dealing with trauma.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you had some great leadership skills, great leadership coaching. And so you mentioned about the work being tough. So I want to ask you about burnout. Now,
Yeah.
burnout is something that so many people are facing right now. Can you give us some signs of burnout and how do you help clients start with the recovery process?
Sure. Well, there are a range of signs which apply to different people at different times, and not all you will necessarily all let everyone to experience one, but it will be things like feeling excessively tired,
Mhm.
turning to recreational drugs such as alcohol and others, irritability, brain fog, forgetfulness, chronic fatigue, poor sleep quality. There's a whole range of things around that area which really impact on how well people can just do their work. I mean, my own experience was I experienced it twice in different ways. When I first experienced it was when I was actually working there in that business. Well, it wasn't so pronounced, and it was more in retrospect that I recognised it. But I certainly was pretty irritable at times, and I ploughed through. One of the things that happens to people who get burnout is excessive workload. And my boss would say, "Well, I want you to take on this extra project." So the answer to that is, "Well, okay, which of my current projects do you want me to drop?" And then they kind of shuffle around and say, "Well, just do your best." They won't make a
Mhm.
decision for you about which one to drop. Just say, "Do your best." And being a little bit cussed and determined that I would do my best, but it wasn't the wise thing for my body, and it certainly had health consequences in terms of I ended up with high blood pressure, and I think the start of my kidney damage was in those days, and also I became irritable. The next time I experienced burnout was long after that, and um, I won't go through the specific details, but I went through a period of excessive stress about which I could do very little apart from look after myself as best I could. But it was excessive stress, and after the excessive stress stopped, I was left with some underlying stresses which were there and ongoing for quite some time. And one day, I found I could scarcely walk. It was a bit scary.
Mhm.
So that's my personal experience. So it takes us all in different ways. Luckily, I knew how to be able to recover myself. I was able to get myself back on track reasonably quickly, but it does take time, and it's not something necessarily to be rushed. But it is important to sort of the first thing to do is to recognise it as far as possible. So having people understand things that are happening to them it's a useful step. So they can say, maybe I recognize that now. Now I know what that is. I know what to do about, or I can go and do something about it. I can go and find somebody who can help me deal with this.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you highlighted these symptoms because I went through the same thing too with burnout.
Okay.
And burnout was, I tell people all the time, that is not a place you want to be in. My burnout was so bad that I ended up in the hospital for a week. I was dehydrated. I was exhausted mentally and physically. Um, I went from a size 8 to a size 3, 4, and it then
Ooh.
with the burnout, it impacted me a lot physically to the point it was starting to trigger some disorders and different things with my muscles and my joints. I couldn't even lift my arms up. I had to have my son to help me put a shirt on. So burnout and stress, I always tell people, listen, you have to just kind of like prioritize. And there's just some things, sometimes you're just going to have to say no. And I said it from experience because I was always wanting, "Oh, okay, I'll do it." I don't do that anymore. Sometimes I have to delegate stuff.
Good. Pleased to hear it. Delegation is one way of dealing with if you've got a team or people you can delegate to.
Yeah. Yep.
Because another thing that people can usefully recognise is toxic work relationships or being left and therefore being left isolated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, Work relationships which are toxic are very hard to deal with and very hard to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
And they are toxic to the psyche. They niggle away and sort of drain your own energy. And if there's a background of being undervalued anyway, or that can lead to being undervalued, all of these things turn into this melting pot.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about burnout, I can sometimes lead to imposter syndrome. And that
Sure.
is something that I learned about maybe about a year or two ago. And
Okay.
I had never heard the term, so I was very amazed at the education I got on that. And so imposter syndrome and anxiety seem to kind of go hand in hand with some people. So how do you help someone overcome those feelings and start believing in themselves?
I think we should just sort of help people understand what imposter syndrome is, Jennifer, because
Hmm.
it's very often understood to be just a lack of confidence, but it's more than a lack of confidence. It's about somebody saying, I'm not really that good. I've just been lucky. And one day I'm going to be found out because really I'm a fraud.
Hmm.
And they keep on going. One day I'll be found out because I'm a fraud. And it becomes part of the way they perceive the world.
Yep.
So it becomes part of their core personality.
Yep.
You get that, yeah? So there's self-doubt, there's fear of exposure, leads perfectionism, and the perfectionism drives the burnout because it's never good enough, so you work harder and harder and
Hmm.
harder. Um, so what do I do about it? I've given you a clue, but I have a starting point. My starting point is a technique which sometimes and fairly often will work, is a very rapid pattern disrupt process.
Hmm.
Where we take their perception of how they perceive themselves. They choose one out of a list. I'm a fraud or whatever else. I was lucky, whatever it is, and they replace it with words of their choice. And in doing so, because we're doing it very rapidly, the subconscious actually then starts to accept that new pattern that's being introduced into the system. Now, one of the things about imposter syndrome is when I first researched this, it was the research was done by somebody I think she was called Clancy and Imes or something like that, and their research showed that it was largely females,
Hmm.
and it was about 70% of females experienced it. Now, there are some well-known figures in the world. I'll not name names just in case, but they're very well-known figures who are believed to have experienced imposter syndrome. So the reality is it actually applies to all genders. We're all capable of experiencing this, but the level of imposter syndrome in the population is surprisingly high. And the original
Hmm.
showed like 70%, and figures I've seen since then showed it maybe not quite as high as that, but still fairly high. So it's something that people can experience often. And so it kind of leads to this lack of confidence. It leads to the anxiety. It leads to perfectionism, and therefore the burnout, all that kind of stuff. So it's high achievers, especially, get it especially. But when Clancy and her colleague, I think Clancy was female, were doing their research, they said there were two particular things they discovered. There were two aspects to it. One, so it formed in early years.
Hmm.
And on the one hand, it forms in families where the young person, is overshadowed by their sibling. The sibling is brilliant at whatever they do. Doesn't matter whether they are brilliant or not, but they are perceived to be brilliant. But the other person is regarded as being the sociable one, the nice one.
Hmm.
But they can be the opposite of what they're believed to be. They can be the clever one. but they're never perceived as that. So they then have to make up for that loss of perception by becoming this, impossible self. This imposter lands on them, so they think they're a fraud. The other aspect of that is that they discovered is that it's quite different. If I can remember this, is that they are perceived to be bright and capable, and then they're expected to do everything.
Yep.
And if they don't live up to expectations, what happens then? I can't let the world down. I can't let people's belief in me down. I'm lost. Who am I then if I let people down?
Mm-hmm.
So this is another aspect. These are the two core aspects which Clancy and Imes came up with. So you'll once you understand that, you'll start to, and when you sort of talking to people, you start to you kind of start to tune into these little details.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for shedding more awareness around imposter syndrome, because I really wanted people to understand what it means. And so I'm looking at your background, and it says awake the leader within. So that sounds like transformation to me. So you talk about transformation and helping people find the hero within them. So can you explain what that means and how someone can begin that journey?
Sure. Let me start with Joseph Campbell's work. I know whether you're familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey work. Maybe your listeners are, maybe not, but that's the starting point. Joseph Campbell was a mythologist, and he explored universal storytelling. He did a fabulous book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's a colossal piece of work. There are about 1,000 PhDs in this one book. I kid you not. It is colossal piece of research. And he did lots of other things too. Lots of other things he's written, but he was always exploring myth and archetypes. So he came up with this concept of the hero's journey, and you see this hero's journey in across the world at different times, in different locations, in different societies, different cultures. It's not just a Western thing. He was seeing it in all different areas. And depending on who you read for a summary, there are certainly 12 stages of the journey. Some people describe that as being 17, but it starts with the normal world where we are now. And then the wake-up call comes. It might be a crisis. It probably is a crisis. It might be something that awakens you to a hidden yearning you've always had, and suddenly you become aware of this inner yearning to do something. And so that's when you hear the call. That's the call to adventure. But, and it's a big but, some people refuse the call.
Mm-hmm.
You may recognize that in yourself, you may recognize it in others. Listeners may recognize it in themselves. It's not the end of the world if you refuse the call, because one time when I was doing my program, a young American guy, he training hypnotherapy, he said to me, "I refused the call, and now I've heard it." And he went off to do a PhD at Pacific Institute in clinical psychology, which is wow. So that's the power. That's the power of it. Anyway, along the way in the hero's journey, the people meet the mentor. They cross the threshold. They get allies. They go through various tests to check the mettle, and they have to overcome a dragon. There's a dragon to be slain. Just like in days of old, somehow there will be a dragon to be slain. The dragon nowadays, though, and in my program, which is called Find Your Hero Within, which very only very roughly mimics Campbell's hero's journey, but it's a good facsimile, but it's rather different. There's the dragon to be slain are the negative beliefs we all carry. So that's the dragon that we slay. Now, one of the key things that in Find Your Hero Within is that there's another wonderful book by Carol Pearson who writes about archetypes, and her one of her books is called Awakening. I think it's called Awakening the Hero Within.
Okay.
And you'll see the similarity: awakening the hero within to awakening the leader within. And she introduces 12 empowering archetypes. So in Find Your Hero Within, it's not just a question of journeying on your own, because it's a nearly 6.5, 7 hour program. It's not a flight. I'll come back to the shorter version in a minute. It's quite lengthy. So early on, the 12 archetypes are introduced to the participant, the client, and they get to choose one archetype. Ideally choosing one. Choosing 12 would be too much. So this is an empowering archetype. And so they embrace this psychologically, emotionally within themselves as they undertake the journeys.
Mm-hmm.
So we do something which approximates to the hero's journey. Along the way, in the course of things, we do. There's something which is I can't remember the name of it, but it's a bit like the Yellow Brick Road. They follow a road, but it's got different colours on it. And at the end of it, they get a pair of wonderful shoes, just like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz itself is full of archetypes. One of the key things which is really transformative, apart from the participating in the journeys themselves, is there are 24 questions which people answer in a light trance during the course of the program. And answering the questions in a light trance is important because they tend to get a different answer to the ones they would get if they just did it in a straightforward cognitive way, just if they sat down and thought about it. So my invitation to people who do the program, which, as I say, can be done as a group or it can be done individually, is to do the questions in trance, and then they do them by themselves slowly with the workbook to look at, and they can go through the questions slowly. Then they compare the two sets of answers, the one which they did in trance, the one they now have where they've done it on a straightforward cognitive basis. And the point of that is that it then gives them some major insights about why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I going? And they get to write their own epitaph. How do I want to be remembered in this world? So we take them right to the point of death. At this point, how do you want to be remembered? Write it down. So it's amazingly powerful work. Now I do have a very short form, which is just an hour-long thing, which I broke it down into an hour-long metaphorical journey. It's nothing like as powerful as the full thing, but I did use it for a little bit of mentoring work with a Ukrainian woman who'd left Ukraine because of the war. Mm-hmm. She moved to a different country. And so her English was just okay, and she understood what I was saying, but I had to repeat myself sometimes. So we were able to converse. Her written English was very good. She was incredibly clever. So the first session we did was just listening and talking about how she saw the world, what all her problems were, and how she was limiting herself. So then I sent her that short video, And she said, Charles, this is rubbish. This is rubbish. I don't understand it at all. And then somebody in Ukrainian explained what it was about. And she woke
Mhm.
up. And then she heard the call. And then she never looked back. She flew after that. There's a blog post on my website which I can share with you later on, Jennifer, if you like it.
Okay, sure. All right. So it sounds like that is a transformation journey. So I'm glad that she answered the call in the end. And I
Yeah,
like that you say that because it made me reflect on myself. That I've dropped the ball a couple of times because I missed the call. But now that
you
I
do.
know better, I'm doing better. So I know when to answer the call and then accept it and be okay with accepting the call.
Yeah.
And so, before we wrap up today, is there one practical tip or piece of advice that you'd like to leave with the listeners, or how someone can begin um, their journey to feeling unstuck, overwhelmed, or maybe they're unsure of the next step?
Yeah, sure. Can I give several?
You sure can.
Okay. Step number one, what comes from one of my greatest teachers called Patricia White Buffalo. She's based in California, if anybody wants to look her up. And she talks about awaken the magnificence within. Awaken to your magnificence. Awaken to your magnificence is what she says. So that's my first message. Awaken to your magnificence. It is such a powerful message. This idea of awakening. So awaken to your magnificence. Because you truly are. You don't know it because you've had all these limiting beliefs.
Mhm.
Okay? That's my start for 10. So really, really think. And people will reject that. They'll reject that. It's like a call. And the people are going to reject it. That's okay. But please just go away and think about it.
Mhm.
As you're thinking about it, learn to breathe. Are you going to say, what? I've been breathing since the day I was born. Yes, but learn to breathe rhythmically. Now, I have a way of teaching rhythmic breathing, which is fairly quick. I don't have any. I don't think having the videos on it, but I suppose I could. Actually, do it's part of a program I've recorded for sale. But if anybody wrote in from here and said, "Can I have your video and instructions about how to do rhythmic breathing?" If they write in through you, I will send it. What I'll do is I'll send it to you, and then you can pass it on to anybody who writes into you.
Great, thank you.
The point about rhythmic breathing is that when you practice it for 20 minutes a day, it helps to regulate the nervous system. And when you practice it for 20 minutes, you can actually extend your lifespan by up to 10 years, according to a UK-based cardiologist. So that's not to be sniffed at in a UK phrase, British phrase. So that's a couple of things. Another one, a quick one on breathing as well. And I'm going to teach this right now, so it's very simple. Is to calm for anxiety and even panic attack. I don't like attack in panic. I used to talk about panic rather than panic attack. Is to breathe into the count of 7 and breathe out to the count of 11. Always breathe through your nose. You never breathe through your mouth. You breathe through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose. I'll say that again.
Mm.
You breathe through your mouth as often as you eat through your nose. So, in other words, you don't breathe through your mouth at all. Always breathe through your nose. So you can breathe into the count of 7 and breathe out to the count of 11. So it's in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out. No pause. Out. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and repeat it. That will take the edge off anxiety. I hate queues. Put me in a queue, and climbing up the wall. 7-Eleven is great. It's great for traffic lights. If you're stuck at traffic lights on red, 7-Eleven breathing.
I like that. Okay.
So that's a couple of things, as well as awakening to your magnificence. I would offer to your listeners, because you truly are magnificent. Don't let anybody ever tell you different. Don't matter who they are. It's your life. Be you.
Yeah, that was a great word of encouragement. So I'm pretty sure that that'll resonate with someone who is going to view this video later on. I like that.
Good.
So I thank you so much for coming on today. I'll be in contact with you soon with the video and everything that you need. And again, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast to help me continue to break stigmas around issues concerning mental health.
Good. I'm glad I'm able to help you, Jennifer. Keep up your good work. It's very, very important. Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Sure. Thank you. You take care.
You too. Take care. Bye
Okay.
bye.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.